In 2019, Arav Mehta left his small hometown of Vadodara, India, filled with ambition and a sense of purpose. At just 22 years old, he had secured a student visa to study computer science at a mid-tier university in Toronto, Canada. His parents, a retired teacher and a part-time seamstress, had stretched their savings thin and taken out a sizable loan to fund his first year abroad. For Arav, this was more than just an education. It was a chance to change his family's future. But Canada wasn't easy. Life in Toronto was expensive and lonely. Between lectures, Arav worked long hours at a 24-hour gas station and delivered food on his bike to keep up with rent and tuition. He rarely slept more than 4 hours a night, but he kept pushing, driven by the hope that all this struggle would one day be worth it. One chilly November evening, while working a catering shift at a luxury fundraiser hosted in a downtown art gallery, Arav met Catherine Blake. She was striking, confident, and clearly from a very different world. At 42, Catherine was a tech entrepreneur and socialite, married to Richard Blake, a well-known businessman with political ties. Something about Arav's quiet charm caught her attention. To him, she seemed powerful and untouchable, yet she spoke to him with surprising warmth. Over the following weeks, Catherine found reasons to see him again. She offered him leftover food from events, then rides home, and finally invites to her penthouse. Their affair began in secret. Arav was both intimidated and captivated by her. For the first time since arriving in Canada, he felt seen. What he didn't realize was that this relationship would take him far beyond his dreams, and eventually into a darkness he couldn't escape. Arav's life changed almost overnight. Once living paycheck to paycheck in a shared basement apartment, he suddenly found himself in Catherine Blake's glittering world of wealth and privilege. She spoiled it with expensive clothes, the latest gadgets, and weekend getaways to luxury resorts. He was flown in private jets, dined at members-only restaurants, and attended exclusive parties filled with Canada's elite. His classmates noticed a change. No more late-night shifts, no more second-hand clothes. But Arav kept quiet. He was still the same person, just with different circumstances. Or so he told himself. Catherine was careful to keep the relationship hidden. She remained married to Richard Blake, though their relationship had become more of a business arrangement than a marriage. Publicly, they appeared united, attending events hand in hand, smiling for the cameras. Privately, Catherine spent most nights away, claiming to be on work trips while secretly meeting Arav. The secrecy added thrill to their affair, but also made Arav anxious. He constantly looked over his shoulder, unsure who might be watching. Though deeply infatuated, he sometimes felt like a guest in someone else's life. Catherine controlled every detail, from what he wore to who he could be seen with. She spoke often of how he was different, how he deserved more than a life of struggle. Arav, starved for validation, clung to her praise. But there were moments when things didn't sit right. She once gave him a brand new iPhone and asked him to stop using his Indian number. Another time, she warned him never to tag her in any photos or mention her name to anyone. Still, the comfort and illusion of love were too powerful. Arav didn't question much. He was young, in love, and blind to the reality that he was slowly being drawn into something far more dangerous than he imagined. By mid-2020, Arav's student visa was nearing its expiration, and the pressure of maintaining legal status in Canada began to weigh heavily on him. The stress affected his studies, and sleepless nights returned, not from work, but from fear. If he didn't find a solution, he would be forced to return to India, which he saw as a failure not just for himself, but for his entire family, who had sacrificed so much. Catherine, always calculating and in control, presented what seemed like an easy fix. She suggested a marriage of convenience. Arav would marry a Canadian citizen to obtain permanent residency. He resisted at first, not wanting to break the law. But Catherine was persuasive. She reminded him of everything he'd lose if he left Canada and promised to handle everything. Within weeks, Catherine introduced him to Emma Hayes, a 28-year-old aspiring actress facing financial trouble. Emma had been involved in similar arrangements before and knew the script well. She would be paid $$30,000 to legally marry Arav and pose as his wife during immigration interviews. A small downtown wedding was staged with a few fake friends as witnesses. Photos were taken, a shared bank account was opened, and a lease was signed for a tiny apartment neither of them planned to live in. Ara felt conflicted but convinced himself it was temporary, a necessary compromise for a better future. Catherine reassured him constantly, promising it was foolproof and that many people did it. She even claimed to have helped others in similar situations. But cracks started to show. Immigration officers conducted surprise interviews. Emma forgot small details, like the color of his toothbrush or what side of the bed he slept on. Arif sensed something wasn't right, but he kept quiet, unaware that this fake marriage was just the surface of a much deeper, more dangerous operation. The events surrounding Richard Blake's sudden death sent ripples through Toronto's elite circles, but no one dared speak openly. The official statement declared it a suicide, yet whispers of foul play began to circulate in private gatherings. Richard was known to be stern but mentally stable, and those close to him found it difficult to accept that he would end his life without warning or explanation. Still, without a suicide note or clear evidence of crime, the case was closed quietly. Catherine inherited a large portion of his wealth and shares in their joint businesses, making her one of the wealthiest women in the city overnight. For Arif, the situation grew more unstable by the day. Catherine became elusive, almost paranoid. Their once daily communication dwindled into silence. She ignored his calls, responded to texts with vague excuses, and avoided meeting in person. When he showed up unannounced at her penthouse, the doorman told him Catherine had left town. Confused and increasingly desperate, Arif turned to Emma, only to find that she, too, was under pressure. Immigration authorities had reopened their case after noticing irregularities in Emma's financial records and living situation. She warned Arif that they were both being watched and advised him to keep a low profile. What Arif didn't know was that Catherine had already started erasing her connection to him. She deleted their message history, cut off money transfers, and told her legal team to prepare for damage control if the affair came to light. With Richard gone, she had more to lose than ever before. Arif, once her secret indulgence, had become a serious liability. His desperation grew as the walls began to close in. He had no legal status, no protection, and now no one left to trust. He didn't realize just how close danger truly was. 2 weeks after Richard Blake's death, Arif Mehta disappeared without a trace. He stopped attending classes, missed scheduled check-ins with immigration, and left his small apartment abandoned, his belongings untouched. His university assumed he had dropped out or left the country, while his family back in India grew increasingly worried after days of unanswered calls and messages. Emma Hayes, the woman he had married for the visa scheme, told investigators she hadn't spoken to him in weeks and had no idea where he'd gone. To most, it seemed like Arif had simply vanished, but authorities suspected something more. A breakthrough came when a neighbor of Catherine Blake's reported something strange to police. Security camera footage showing Arif entering Catherine's home late one evening, carrying a backpack. The same camera never recorded him leaving. The footage was time-stamped just 3 days after Richard's death. When investigators followed up, Catherine claimed she hadn't seen Arif in months and denied he had been at her home. Her story didn't match the video, and suspicions escalated quickly. Police obtained a search warrant and combed through Catherine's multi-million-dollar penthouse and garage. There, in the corner of the garage, they found small traces of blood. Forensic testing confirmed it was Arif's. Additional evidence, a set of his keys and a student ID card, was hidden beneath a false panel in the trunk of Catherine's luxury SUV. Despite this, no body was found, and without a confession, building a murder case would be difficult. Still, the circumstantial evidence was damning. Catherine was arrested for obstruction of justice and brought in for questioning. The media erupted with the story of the millionaire and the missing student. As headlines spread, a darker truth was quietly uncovered, one that hinted Arif's case was only the beginning of something much larger. The trial of Catherine Blake became one of the most high-profile cases in recent Canadian legal history. Media outlets across North America and India covered every detail, framing it as a twisted story of power, manipulation, and exploitation. Prosecutors painted Catherine as a wealthy predator who used her influence to control vulnerable international students, with Arv Mehta being her final and possibly fatal target. They laid out a timeline showing her growing desperation after her husband's suspicious death and how she methodically erased her connection to Arv as investigators closed in. Although Arv's body was never recovered, the blood evidence, security footage, and inconsistencies in her story were enough to pursue a murder charge. The trial revealed even more shocking details. Investigators uncovered a series of emails, encrypted messages, and financial records linking Catherine to at least 4 other international students over the previous 5 years. Each had been promised support with immigration in exchange for personal favors, and each had signed fraudulent documents or entered fake marriages similar to R's arrangement with Emma. One student from Nigeria had already been deported. Another from the Philippines had gone missing briefly before resurfacing and refusing to speak publicly. The pattern was undeniable. Emma Hayes testified against Catherine in exchange for a reduced sentence. She admitted the marriage had been arranged and funded entirely by Catherine, and that she had been instructed to follow a specific script during immigration interviews. Her testimony was a final blow. In the end, Catherine Blake was found guilty of second-degree murder, immigration fraud, and obstruction of justice. She received a life sentence with no possibility of parole for 25 years. Arv Mehta's body was never found, and his disappearance remains officially unsolved. But to those who followed the case, the truth was clear and chilling.